763 million. Let that number sink in for just a second. 763 million adults worldwide cannot read. That's a staggering, brand new 2024 statistic from UNESCO. And honestly, this isn't just some tiny crack in our global education system. It's a massive, systemic crisis. It's a number so incredibly vast it almost loses its meaning, but it absolutely demands our immediate attention and a fundamental shift in how we approach teaching.
Now let's bring this right down to the classroom level. In sub-Saharan Africa alone, over 80% of children reach grade 4 and literally cannot read a simple sentence. 80%! We really have to remember that these aren't just invisible data points on a spreadsheet. These are real kids sitting in classrooms right now. They're being failed by systems that prioritize just moving through a curriculum over actual comprehension. Systems that reward memorizing words instead of genuine reading mastery.
So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating framework from international educator and literacy specialist Blessing Michael. It's a completely data-driven model designed to, well, rewrite this entire global literacy narrative. Okay, let's dive into this, because the foundational truth we're uncovering today is simply this. You absolutely cannot fix what you haven't measured. We're going to discover why baseline data is the ultimate key to structured literacy and unlocking the potential of every single learner.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The global literacy crisis. 2. Decoding versus comprehension. 3. Guessing is not reading. 4. Why baseline data matters. 5. The diagnostic reading audit. And finally, number 6, knowing, not approximating.
All right, kicking things off with part 1, the global literacy crisis, and specifically mismatched tools in diverse classrooms.
So here's what happens a lot. Schools will adopt these reading programs that were built for one very specific linguistic context, usually an English-first environment. Now imagine taking those exact tools and dropping them wholesale into classrooms where kids are speaking Yoruba, Hausa, Tagalog, or Swahili at home. When the reading outcomes inevitably fall flat, it is never the children's intelligence that's at fault, not at all. It's simply a massive mismatch between the imported instructional tool and the child's actual everyday reality.
Moving on to part 2, decoding versus comprehension, and identifying the true gap.
Now, I really want you to think about this for a second. Have you ever sat with a child who can quote-unquote read, meaning, they're moving their lips and vocalizing the words, but then when you ask them what they just read, they give you this completely blank look. It's heartbreaking, right? And it's a super common experience for educators everywhere. It totally validates the struggles you might be seeing every single day. But it really begs the question, what's the actual root cause here?
Well, what you're actually witnessing in that exact moment is the stark difference between mechanical decoding and true comprehension. Mechanical decoding is just vocalizing sounds from a page. There's absolutely zero meaning attached to it. True comprehension, on the other hand, means actively understanding, engaging, maybe even laughing or reacting to the text. So that blank look, that doesn't mean the kid isn't capable, not at all. It just signifies a massive decoding gap caused by a lack of systematic instruction. Basically, they haven't been explicitly taught how to bridge the sounds they're making with the meaning of the real world around them.
Which brings us to part 3, guessing is not reading, and how we break down literacy myths. Now, what's really interesting here is this pervasive, lingering myth that kids should learn to read by guessing words from context clues, or looking at pictures, or just flat out memorizing the shapes of whole sight words. But the reality, which is heavily backed by the actual science of reading, is that we absolutely must explicitly teach structured phonetic rules and sound-letter relationships. I mean, think about it. English alone has 44 unique sounds, but somehow over 250 ways to spell them. That's wild. Nobody is born just inherently knowing these complex codes. They have to be mapped out and taught systematically.
I actually want to pause for a second and just really anchor on this non-negotiable principle. Guessing is not a reading strategy. Think about that for a minute. If we teach a child to look at the first letter and then guess the whole word based on some picture on the page, well, what happens when they get a book with no pictures, right? They hit a brick wall. Guessing builds this super fragile house of cards, whereas explicit phonetic instruction, that builds a permanent, unbreakable foundation.
All right, let's jump into part 4, why baseline data matters and the sheer power of measurement.
Teaching without data is not teaching. It is hoping. Honestly, this right here is the central thematic anchor of our entire explainer today. We literally cannot just walk into a highly diverse classroom, crack open some foreign published workbook, and just hope for the best. We can't. Structured literacy requires actual, tangible measurement. You have to know exactly where a student stands in their reading journey before you can even begin to effectively guide them forward. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact difference in approaches. Standard methods tend to just assume prior knowledge. They encourage guessing from pictures, and they rely on this really vague, approximated understanding of a child's skill level. But baseline data tracks the specifics. We're talking exact sound-letter relationships and orthographic mapping, which, by the way, is how the brain permanently connects sounds to letters for instant recall. These baseline assessments reveal the exact, specific hurdles for culturally diverse kids. It completely takes the guesswork out of the equation.
Which leads perfectly into Part 5, the diagnostic reading audit and practical implementation. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Here is the step-by-step breakdown. Step 1 is the 15-minute audit. You sit down with the learner and run a fast, highly targeted baseline assessment. Step 2, you identify specific phoneme gaps. So you look at that audit data and pinpoint exactly which sound-letter rules they missed. And Step 3, you implement targeted intervention based on that exact data. This just proves that auditing a classroom doesn't require thousands of dollars in fancy edtech. It can be done quickly, it's incredibly accurate, and it will profoundly change your day-to-day teaching strategy.
And finally, Part 6, knowing, not approximating, and empowering the learner. When you actually utilize baseline data, you're constantly connecting everything back to that individual learner. Exact gaps are identified, right? They're not assumed. And that allows you to take culturally relevant, highly targeted action. Plus, it builds this flawless foundation for incredible initiatives, like Blessing Michael's Story Bridges, which are these community-led literacy cycles that use local, culturally meaningful stories once that core decoding foundation is set. But the best part? Taking the guesswork out of teaching genuinely empowers educators to scale their impact. This exact methodology works whether you're standing in a single, under-resourced classroom or managing literacy programs across an entire school district. Because at the end of the day, learners deserve a standard of knowing, not just approximating. We absolutely owe it to that 80% we talked about at the very beginning to stop guessing and start measuring. You could explore the Tales and Treasures initiative to start running your own diagnostic audits right away, but I really want to leave you with this final thought. If we completely stop guessing how children read and finally start measuring what they actually know, what else might we discover they are truly capable of achieving? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer as we continue uncovering the data that changes how we learn. See you next time.